My name is George Miller. I'm 68 years old, and for 42 years I worked as a senior operations supervisor at Ohio Public Utilities in Cleveland. I'm not a man of grand words or flashy appearances. I wear simple suits, drive a 2018 Ford Taurus, and have always preferred working behind the scenes rather than seeking attention. Throughout my entire life, I dedicated every penny, every weekend, every holiday to my family, especially to my daughter, Sarah. Sarah Davis, now 30 years old, was always the center of my universe. I worked double shifts to pay for her private college, sold my classic 1969 Chevelle to fund her MBA, and never once complained about the sacrifices. My wife, Brenda, was always well taken care of, too. We owned our home, had premium health insurance, annual vacations to Myrtle Beach. I thought we were a close-knit family. What they didn't know was that, besides my salary at the utilities company, I had built a considerable investment portfolio over the decades. Apple stock purchased in 1997, real estate acquired during the 2008 crisis, diversified mutual funds. I kept everything in separate accounts, always discreet about my personal finances. It wasn't showing off, it was prudence. If you enjoy stories of cold-blooded revenge and gripping plot twists, like this video and subscribe to the channel now. There are brand new, unreleased stories here every day, each one more intense than the last. Sarah's wedding to Daniel Smith was scheduled for the last Saturday in September at the Marriott downtown Cleveland. Daniel was a real estate broker, son of a wealthy family from Shaker Heights. Since the engagement, I noticed subtle changes in their behavior. Brenda started making comments about my appearance. "George, you need better clothes for the wedding," or "I hope you don't embarrass Sarah in front of Daniel's family." I thought it was pre-wedding nerves. I was wrong. 3 weeks before the ceremony, I prepared my surprise. A trust fund of $1.2 million for Sarah, plus the deed to a 4-bedroom house in Westlake, valued at $450,000. Everything documented, signed, ready to be delivered at the reception. It would be my wedding gift, the result of a lifetime of hard work and smart investments. On the morning of the wedding, I wore my best suit, a navy blue Brooks Brothers I had bought especially for the occasion. It wasn't Armani, but it was respectable. I arrived at the hotel 2 hours before the ceremony to help with final preparations. That's when I heard the conversation that would change everything. I was in the hallway near the bridal preparation room when I heard Sarah's voice. "Mom, did you talk to him about not making any embarrassing speeches?" "I did, honey," Brenda replied. "But you know how your father is. I hope he doesn't ruin your special day." "Daniel already mentioned he finds it weird that my dad is so simple," Sarah continued. "His family has different standards." I stopped breathing. "Maybe we can seat him at a table further away," Brenda suggested. "Away from the important guests." "Good idea. And after the honeymoon, we need to talk about the inheritance. Daniel made some interesting suggestions about investments." Inheritance. As if I were already dead. I entered the main hall where guests were arriving. Daniel Smith greeted me with a fake smile. "Mr. Miller, what an interesting suit." His words carried poorly disguised contempt. During the ceremony, I watched my daughter walk down the aisle. Beautiful, radiant, and completely oblivious to the man who had sacrificed everything for her. When the pastor asked who gives this woman, she didn't even look at me. "I give myself," she said, provoking laughter from the audience. The final stab came during the reception. I approached the newlyweds table to deliver my gift, but Daniel intercepted me. "Mr. Miller, how about taking a walk? The official photos are just for close family." Close family. Sarah saw me and whispered something to Daniel. Both laughed. I couldn't hear the words, but the contempt was evident. That's when I made a decision that had been maturing for 3 decades. I need to go back in time to explain what happened 30 years ago. Sarah was born in March 1994, after a marriage that was already showing cracks. Brenda had gone through a difficult period at the end of 1993. She said she needed space and spent 3 weeks at her sister's house in Columbus. When she returned, she was different, more distant, less affectionate. 2 months later, she announced the pregnancy. I was overjoyed. I would finally be a father. But something bothered me, small details that a man in love prefers to ignore. Brenda avoided my gaze when we talked about the baby. Dates that didn't add up. Whispered phone conversations that stopped when I entered the room. When Sarah was born, the doctor casually commented, "What a big baby for 38 weeks. Brenda quickly corrected, "Actually, doctor, it was exactly 40 weeks. But I remembered the dates perfectly. The doubt ate at me inside like acid. In 1995, when Sarah turned 1, I decided to secretly take a paternity test. I collected DNA samples during a weekend when Brenda was away, visiting the same sister in Columbus. I sent them to a lab in Pittsburgh, using my business address at Ohio Public Utilities. The result arrived 3 weeks later. Sarah was not my biological daughter. I sat in my office at the company, holding that paper, and cried for the first time since my father's death. But then I looked at Sarah's photo on my desk, gummy smile with just one little tooth, and I realized it didn't matter. I loved her. She was my daughter in every way that truly mattered. I kept the test result in a bank safety deposit box. I never confronted Brenda. Never let it affect my love for Sarah. I continued being the dedicated father, working twice as hard, investing every penny in her future. But something changed in me that day. I learned to observe, to document, to protect myself. Back to the wedding, after the humiliation at the newlyweds table, I walked to the bar. I ordered a double whiskey, Jameson, the same my father used to drink. The bartender, a nice young man named Marcus, noticed my expression. "Rough day, sir?" he asked. "You have no idea," I replied. That's when I saw Brenda approaching Daniel near the cake table. She was holding an envelope. I recognized it immediately. It was the documentation for my gift to Sarah. Somehow she had discovered the trust fund and the house. "Daniel," I heard Brenda say, "we need to talk about this after the honeymoon. George has more resources than we imagined." Daniel discreetly opened the envelope. His eyes widened when he saw the numbers. "Jesus Christ, Brenda. 2 million? And this house in Westlake?" "He's always been secretive about money," Brenda explained. "But now that Sarah is married, we need to ensure these resources are well managed." Managed by them, obviously. Marcus, the bartender, had witnessed the conversation too. "Man," he whispered, "your family is talking about your money like you don't exist." "Worse yet," I replied. "They're talking like I'm already dead." At that moment, Daniel approached the microphone on stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "I'd like to thank everyone for being here with us on this special day. In particular, I want to thank Mr. George Miller, who worked so hard to provide this wonderful celebration." The audience applauded politely. Sarah smiled and waved at me, but it was the kind of wave you give to a staff member who provided good service. "Actually," Daniel continued, "Sarah and I would like to invite Mr. Miller to say a few words about his daughter. It was a trap. They wanted to put me on stage to publicly humiliate me, turn me into the awkward father who didn't know how to behave in society. Then they'd use that as justification to exclude me from the family's financial decisions." I stood up slowly and walked to the stage. 200 guests watched me. Sarah smiled nervously. Brenda looked worried, probably fearing I'd make some embarrassing comment. I took the microphone, looked at the audience, and began speaking in a calm, controlled voice. "Thank you, Daniel. I want to start by saying this truly is a special day, a day of truths." I felt the tension in the air increase. For 30 years, I dedicated my life to Sarah. I worked double shifts, gave up my dreams, invested every penny in her future. Because that's what a father does for the child he loves. Sarah smiled, thinking I was making a typical sentimental speech. Today, I had prepared a special gift for my daughter, a trust fund of $1.2 million and the deed to a house in Westlake. Murmurs of surprise spread through the audience. Brenda turned pale. Daniel tried to maintain his smile, but I saw the sweat on his forehead. "But sometimes," I continued, "the biggest surprises aren't the gifts we give, but the truths we discover." The silence was deafening. "Sarah, there's something I need to tell you." something I discovered long ago, but never had the courage to reveal. Now everyone was panicking. Sarah stood up from her chair. Brenda made a move to get on stage, but I continued. The man you called a disgrace today, who isn't good enough to sit with the important guests, who isn't close family enough for the official photos. Dramatic pause. That man was never your biological father. The silence that followed was so profound I could hear the hotel's air conditioning system. 200 people paralyzed, processing what they had just heard. Sarah stood there, mouth open, wedding dress trembling. Brenda had turned white as paper. Daniel looked like a fish out of water, opening and closing his mouth without being able to form words. "That's a lie!" Sarah finally screamed, finding her voice. "You're crazy. You're trying to ruin my wedding." "No, Sarah," I replied calmly, keeping the microphone steady. "I'm trying to save your life from a lie that lasted 30 years. Brenda tried to get on stage, but I raised my hand, asking her to stop. "Brenda, do you really want me to tell all the details here? In front of the entire Smith family? In front of your parents?" She froze in place. She knew exactly what I was talking about. Those 3 weeks in Columbus, the whispered phone conversations, the dates that never added up. "You want proof?" I asked the audience. "I have proof." I pulled a sealed envelope from my suit jacket's inner pocket. It was a certified copy of the paternity test I had done in 1995, kept in the bank vault for 3 decades. This is a paternity test performed when Sarah was 1 year old, Gene Tech Laboratory in Pittsburgh, licensed by the state of Pennsylvania. 99.97% reliability. I handed the envelope to Reverend Johnson, who had officiated the ceremony and was still on stage. "Reverend, could you read the result to the guests?" Reverend Johnson, a 65-year-old man who had known our family for decades, opened the envelope with trembling hands. His eyes scanned the document, and he was visibly shaken. "George," he whispered, "are you sure you want to do this?" "I'm sure, Reverend, the truth needs to be told." He took a deep breath and read, "Paternity test result. The probability of George Miller being the biological father of minor Sarah Miller is 0%. Paternity exclusion confirmed." Chaos erupted. People stood up from tables, whispers turned into loud conversations, cell phones started recording. Daniel's mother, Mrs. Elizabeth Smith, an elegant 60-year-old woman, dramatically put her hand to her chest. "Oh my God, Daniel, did you know about this?" Daniel was in total panic. "No, of course not. This is what, Daniel?" I interrupted, still on the microphone. "This is inconvenient? This disrupts your plans for my money? Because I heard you talking about my inheritance earlier." Sarah started crying, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of anger and humiliation. "You ruined everything. You destroyed my wedding. Why? Why did you do this?" "I did this," I replied, stepping down from the stage and walking toward her. "Because for 30 years I loved you as my daughter. I worked 2 jobs to pay for your college. I sold my classic car to fund your MBA. I spent weekends building your treehouse instead of fishing with my friends." I stopped right in front of her. "And today, on your wedding day, you treated me like an inconvenient stranger. You called me a disgrace. You decided I wasn't close family enough for your official photos." Brenda finally found the courage to speak. "George, please, can we talk about this privately?" "Privately?" I laughed bitterly. "Like the private conversations you had with your lover in Columbus? Like the private plans you made to manage my money? No, Brenda. Enough secrets." I turned to the audience. "I want everyone to know that I loved Sarah as my own daughter, even knowing the truth. But true love isn't one-sided. It's not based on lies or financial interest." I took the envelope with the trust fund and house documents that Daniel was still holding. This was my wedding gift. 1. $2 million in a trust fund, plus a house valued at $450,000. I was ready to give it all, even after discovering that you saw me only as a walking bank. I tore up the documents in front of everyone. But no more. These resources will be donated to organizations that truly make a difference. Daycare centers for needy children, scholarship programs for young people from working families, people who value sacrifice and dedication. Sarah screamed like a child having a tantrum. "You can't do this. That money is mine by right." "By right?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Based on what? On 30 years of contempt? On treating me like a stranger at my own daughter's wedding? Or maybe on the fact that I discovered I'm not even your biological father?" Daniel tried one last desperate play. "Mr. Miller, I'm sure we can work this out. Maybe there was a misunderstanding." "There was no misunderstanding, Daniel. There was absolute clarity. I heard you planning how to manage my inheritance. I saw you treating my 3 decades of dedication as something embarrassing. And I discovered that the daughter for whom I sacrificed everything sees me as a source of money, not as a father." The Smith family was in complete shock. Daniel's father, Robert Smith, a corporate lawyer, whispered something in his wife's ear, probably calculating the damage to the family's reputation and whether there was any legal way to contest my decision. "Reverend Johnson," I said, "I'd like it on record that I consider this ceremony a farce based on lies and financial interest. I cannot bless a union that began with contempt and greed." The Reverend shook his head sadly. "George, I don't know what to say. I've known your family for so long. It's not my family, Reverend. It never was. I just took 30 years to accept that reality." I walked to the table where my jacket was, picked it up calmly, and headed for the exit. Before leaving, I turned one last time to the silent audience. "Truth always sets you free," I said, looking directly at Sarah, "even when it hurts, especially when it hurts." I left the Marriott downtown Cleveland for the last time as a member of that family. The fresh September air had never felt so invigorating. I drove my Ford Taurus to Lake Erie and sat on a bench by the shore watching the waves. For the first time in 30 years, I felt truly free. In the following days, the consequences unfolded like falling dominoes. Cleveland is a big city, but certain social circles are small and everyone knows everyone. The story of the wedding that exploded spread like wildfire. The Cleveland Plain Dealer even published a small note in the society section, obviously without mentioning names, about a dramatic incident at a downtown wedding reception. Sarah called me dozens of times. Brenda showed up at my door 3 times. I didn't answer any calls, didn't open the door for anyone. My lawyer, James Morrison, a competent man who had represented me for 15 years, handled all legal communication. The first letter arrived a week later. It was from Daniel, obviously drafted by some Smith family lawyer. It alleged unjustified public embarrassment and defamation of character. Morrison laughed when he read it. "George, he's bluffing. Truth isn't defamation, and you have irrefutable documentation." The second letter came from Sarah, handwritten, desperate. "Dad, please forgive me. I didn't know what I was saying. The wedding stress, the pressure from Daniel's family. Please, can we talk?" Dad. After 30 years now I was Dad again. But it was too late. Some words can't be taken back, some humiliations can't be forgotten. And most importantly, some truths can't be ignored. 2 months later, I learned from neighbors that Sarah and Daniel were getting divorced. The Smith family had canceled all promised investments for the new couple. Daniel, discovering there would be no family fortune to manage, decided Sarah was no longer a viable investment. The exact words were reported by Brenda's sister-in-law, who works at the same beauty salon as Daniel's mother's secretary. Cleveland really is a small town. Brenda tried one last play in December. She showed up at my office at Ohio Public Utilities. She had discovered where I worked after 42 years of marriage. My secretary, Margaret, a 58-year-old lady who protected me like a pit bull, tried to stop her. "Margaret, it's okay," I said. "Let her in." Brenda entered my office. She was thinner, with dark circles under her eyes. Stress was taking its toll. "George," she began, "we need to talk about our marriage." "Our marriage ended the moment you decided I was a disgrace," I replied without looking up from the reports I was analyzing. "I never said that. You said I shouldn't ruin Sarah's day. You said I was embarrassing. You planned to seat me away from the important guests." She started crying. I was nervous. It was our daughter's wedding. She's not our daughter, Brenda, and you know that very well. Silence. Who is the real father? I asked calmly. More silence. It was Marcus Coleman, wasn't it? The accountant you met in Columbus. She collapsed in the chair. How did you? I always knew, Brenda. I just took 30 years to accept it. Marcus Coleman, married, father of 2, whom you met when you visited your sister. 3 weeks of space to discover you were pregnant by another man. George, please, where is he now? He died in 2018, heart attack. And did he know about Sarah? No, he never knew. At least he spared me that. I want a divorce, Brenda. My lawyer will be in touch. She left crying. It was the last time we spoke. The divorce process was surprisingly simple. Ohio is an equitable distribution state, but my personal investments, kept in separate accounts since the beginning of the marriage, remained with me. Brenda got the house, which was paid off, and half of my company retirement. More than fair, all things considered. Today, 2 years later, I live in a modern apartment in Lakewood, overlooking Lake Erie. I retired from Ohio Public Utilities with full honors, and a party attended by 200 colleagues from 4 decades. People who truly knew and respected me. My investment portfolio, now managed by an independent firm in Columbus, has grown to almost $2.8 million. The difference is that now this money will be used for something that truly matters. I established the Miller Foundation for Working Families, a foundation that offers scholarships to children of public service workers. So far, we've helped 47 young people enter college. Each scholarship comes with a personal letter from me explaining the importance of honest work and true family dedication. Sarah tried to contact me several times through the foundation. She discovered my philanthropic work, probably through Brenda, who still monitors my life through neighbors. The messages are always the same: requests for forgiveness, attempts at reconciliation, hints about family, and second chances. But some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. Especially when we discover they were built on false foundations from the beginning. I don't feel anger. I don't feel bitterness. I feel a deep peace that comes from living in truth. I'm 70 years old now, in excellent health, with sufficient resources, and for the first time in my life, I'm investing in people who truly value dedication and sacrifice. Marcus, the bartender from the Marriott, became my friend. He found out where I lived and invited me to meet his family. He and his wife, Jennifer, have 3 small children. Last Sunday, I helped the oldest son, Tyler, who's 8, build a science project about renewable energy. Tyler calls me Grandpa George. It's funny how life teaches us that family isn't defined by DNA or marriage certificates. It's defined by mutual respect, true love, and shared sacrifice. The last news I had of Sarah was through Margaret, my former secretary, who keeps in touch with some people from the old social circle. Sarah now works as a saleswoman at a department store on the west side. Daniel married again, this time to the daughter of a real estate businessman. Brenda lives alone in the old house, which is mortgaged to cover credit card debts. Sometimes the best revenge isn't what we plan. It's simply living well with dignity, surrounded by people who value us for who we are, not for what we own. I learned that it's never too late to start a new life. That truth, however painful, always sets us free. And that true love, whether from children, parents, or friends, never comes with conditions or financial interest. At 70, I finally discovered what it means to be free. And that freedom is priceless. If you enjoyed this story, like this video, and leave your comment telling me what you thought. And if you're not subscribed to the channel yet, please subscribe and hit the bell to receive notifications of new stories like this one. Thanks for watching and see you next time.